Welcome Geoff Bramwell, who is here, who is currently in British Columbia, which is a part of Canada, as the Canadians mostly know. So great to have you here. I'm glad to be able to sit down and talk Nicaragua. So you're an interesting outlier for people that I talk to, because I've been here, or kind of here, involved investing whatever for 9 years, which makes me a kind of long-termer in Nicaragua. But you make it look like I just showed up. So before we kick off, I'd love to. A lot of my audience has seen you, but it'd be great to get real quickly kind of a background from less of your projects and more of like how long you've been here and your discovery of Nicaragua.
Well, I mean, I'm a product of the Canadian economy. I'm born in Toronto, raised in Vancouver, and not wealthy parents. I'm not a trust fund boy or anything. We started with nothing. My brother and I went to 3 years at UBC, 2 years at University of Western Ontario. I got out of the Honors Business Administration program at the Ivy School of Business, which is the best business degree in the country. And many of my friends went to Wall Street and corporate 500 companies all over, and they're in their 50s and they've done really well. Some have got amassed a lot of money, and some have just done really, really well and done a lot of good things for the economy and for the country. And So, like I say, we started out with nothing in Whistler, as we're commercial paint contractors, and I worked with my brother John, and we built it up over the last 40 years to be a reasonably good size. But we were never really motivated primarily by money. We were motivated mostly by freedom, and I learned that early on in business school, that it's freedom that motivates me, with money and material wealth and all that as a second issue. So that's kind of the background, what drove me to make this decision to set off for Nicaragua or somewhere else in my late 30s, because I was always motivated by freedom of thought, freedom of ideas, freedom of movement, and that to me is much more important than anything. So that's what drove us out of like the Canadian orbit when I was around 38 or so. And everybody thought it was absolutely insane, because we were making a lot of money and we were getting materially very wealthy, and well, not very, but reasonably. And they thought I was insane to say goodbye to all these great investments and go invest in this, absolutely wild west country of Nicaragua. And of course, when you got deeper and deeper in it, it's as wild as you can imagine times 10. Like, it's a wild ride. And so, so the fact that we're here 20 years later and we've survived is incredible. But we have a very good product. But so that's where we came from. And so so I guess we're a visionary in a sense, because people now 20 years later are catching up, and the frustration and anxiety that I was feeling in my 30s about how does this end? Do I just end in a heart attack and die? Is that what I'm doing here? I'm just going to work 40 years, then keel over and die, like so many other people before me, or am I going to do something a little bit more intelligent? And whatever that may be, I don't know. But that's where the investigation started. So it set us off on a different trail, and pretty much alone. And we ended up in Nicaragua. But we did look at other places. We looked at Mexico. We looked at Sayulita closely, Bucarias, Cancun, Tulum. We took a look at, and it was already way too expensive. By 2000, it was already way overpriced. It's 3 to 5 times more expensive now. So if you think you're going to go, you don't have a hope. I met a guy at the airport on the way back last trip a couple months ago, and he was just buying a house in the Gold Coast. He caught it just south of Cancun, and he was sending $1.5 million that day or the next day to finish up on his close on a house in the Gold Coast someplace. And I was like, dude, you're sending, he's, I'm flying back because I'm wiring $1.5 million tomorrow. I was like, wow, like, good for you. You have it. I've sold everything I have. I've sold out of Kelowna and Victoria. I'm out. I'm done. And I was like, well, it's great that you have that amount of money, but most people don't have anything like that. So it's become competitive now, I would say, to find a place where you can relax. And so the issues in Canada that came up in that interview with Pierre, the conservative leader, with the woman from Squamish, She said she was actually from Squamish, but she was living in Cape Breton, which I thought was
True, yeah.
I thought it was really interesting because Squamish is an interesting marketplace. It's a place where you always knew since 1975 was going to blow up, but you just could never guess when. And then finally, about 12 years ago, it exploded. But prior to that, it was not an expensive place. Now, very expensive. So that
Hmm.
same phenomenon is happening, has already happened all over Mexico, Costa Rica, I'd say Panama. And so the number of chairs left, I think the Canadian public are waking up to the fact that the number of chairs left for your possible place to relax and drink some rum in the beach and stuff like all the posters in the bank and the banks say you're supposed to do. The chairs are getting limited. There's not much seating left. If you're in for a price point like under 300, let's say, or under 200, that's what you can muster up. There aren't many chairs left, and you're hitting on that in your video.
Yeah, the same
So
thing coming from the US. We see that it's getting into any market that you're really interested in is quite unreasonably expensive, which is extra scary because it's not, um, you know, the demographic winter has hit, right? And the U.S. and Canada are not at the leading edge of that, like Europe is, and like South Korea is, and Japan, but they are on the front edge, right? They're not on the trailing, they're not in the global South, and so the oncoming economic collapse within a generation of real estate is a very real concern as well. It used to be, when I was little, well, we knew that real estate can't go up forever. Like it has to be based on a function of salaries, but it can skew for quite a long time. And if you have a bubble, and we've already gone through. I went through collapses in the U.S. I went more than a decade unable to sell a house at a fraction of what I paid for it, and in major markets that you'd think would never be tough. So that happens, but you kind of have this general like, well, there's more and more people. If you hold out long enough, eventually someone has to have a house. But now we're looking at a future where already there's generations that are smaller, and they're expected to have yet smaller generations after them. And it's like, oh, that indicates there's going to be a drop in real estate, very likely within maybe not my lifetime, but definitely within my kid's lifetime. So if I'm buying a house and being like, oh, I'm going to put in all this, I may be um, I may be looking at being at the peak potentially, or pretty close to it, so that future has changed.
well, it's a very difficult equation. There's so many variables in that, and the coming property collapse and the real estate bubble and whatnot. It's really, really hard to identify. And I think that the world GDP is about $100 trillion, and the American cut in that is about a quarter, and the Chinese is about 22%, and the Japan is about 7% or so. So between America, China, and Japan, you've got about 56% of the world GDP. So I don't think, like, part of the reason that Canada is not going to fail is because it's just geographically between all these three places, and we're really, really good at extracting natural resources. So I don't think our country is going to collapse or whatnot. But what is happening, I think, is that 35 years of poor management and giving authority to the municipalities about building and allowing to build is now built up to the point where we have a real crisis where housing is just so expensive. And I think what's changed in the last 6 months is that people are realizing that it's taken 30 or 35 years to get into this situation where, like, a tiny little house is almost $2 million. It's going to take another 30 years to get out of good management. And I think people are realizing now that, in my estimation, that this is not a quick solution. The house, the pricing, and I can't afford homes for myself and my wife, but my kids can't either. And it's not going to solve itself in the next 5 or 6 years. So they're thinking a little bit longer term. And I think what's going on is people are saying they're getting scared, and they're realizing that the writing's on the wall, that I don't get a house, but my kids don't either. And then you have this other phenomenon going on well, I mean, Canada has done an amazing job in branding, like marketing its product, marketing its brand. It's the third most recognized flag on the planet. It goes America, England, Canada. and people recognize it. And the branding job has been amazing. And but the goods aren't quite there. Like it's not. It's it's marketed very very well, but underlying it is not. It's not all there as. And so people are coming to the country, immigrating and stuff, and they're like, "Oh my God, I had no idea that I have no hope here in this country," and they're kind of waking up. And that's
I've seen a lot of YouTube channels that are that immigrants arriving in Canada and being like, I came here as everyone is disappearing. It really is a struggle. And of course, we see the same thing in the U.S. as well. Immigrants going to the U.S. are generally, there's exceptions, of course, but so often faced with, oh my gosh, I've gotten myself into this and I no longer have the resources to return and don't have the resources to survive. And the marketing is strong for sure.
yeah, yeah. But then the local population, like the old time population, they're But one group is not crying. That's the people that own the real estate. I mean, the people that have the wealth and that have 100 to 400 units, and then their rent roll is doubling every say 3 years. They're not complaining. Like so. Of course, that's the minority. So it's creating a situation where people are like, well, you know what? I don't want to make the focus of my life surviving, and I don't want the focus of my life to be. I have one objective, that's to own my house, and I'm going to spend the next 40 years busting my butt to do that. They kind of want, most people want a little more out of life than that. So I think that's what's waking up here. We also have an election October 2025, so a year after the American one. And so they're politicking and they're making political statements about things that, it's politicking, right? So it's not always 100% true, but it's also a good time in Canada because that's when real issues get discussed. So like in this country, a year and a half out from the election, that's when actually real issues get thrown on the table and real concerns. And the number one concern is housing in this country. The economy is not doing bad. It's doing like 3% growth, and for a fully developed economy, 3% growth is excellent. It's not doing bad at all. It's doing very well. But they're all everybody's yapping about housing, and like, just give you a personal example. Like, I have a little house here. I'm not in the city of Vancouver. I'm in the suburbs. I'm in a little fishing farming community, and I love this place. But I have a house. It's a very small house, maybe 2,500 square feet, 3 bedroom, and it's no big deal. My lot is 22 feet wide. That's it. It's like 8 meters or 7 meters wide. That's all. And the thing is, in American money is $1.5 million for this little place, right? And this is like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, nobody can. It's no
That
big
is
deal.
crazy.
It's crazy, right? And that's the kind of numbers you're talking about. And like I say to my wife, it's like, look, you know what? We're not in a cold area of Canada. We're on the ocean. It's temperate. It's not cold, but still, when I go to Nicaragua in January and you stay here with the son because he's in high school, I come back to a $600 electricity bill, even though we have a gas fireplace that's doing most of the heating, and it's $600 for you guys to sit here and watch TV, and I spend less money having a great time in the sun in Nicaragua, and it doesn't make any sense, right? And she's like, yeah, I agree. Like, it just, and so that's the situation that people are reacting to in this thing about Canadians fleeing. And I don't think anybody's fleeing, but I think people are like, I need a better plan, and I need to kind of have a look around and educate myself. And what's a better plan than the way this is running right now? Because I'm not getting anywhere.
Yeah, my view of it personally is definitely not a fleeing situation. I mean, you meet people who are panicking about any situation, right? So there's always somebody, but that goes without saying in every market. But the thing that I think is important here, the thing that Pierre really is alluding to, obviously he's politicking and he's going to say things to get views, and he should. That's his job. But the real thing that's happening, like that family, that person he interviewed, they didn't flee Cape Breton. What they did was they reached a tipping point where the economics of staying and the value that they get from staying in wherever they're from has dropped below the value that they'll get from somewhere else. And there's a couple of factors that are always going to play in. There's always the fear of change. So most people have a certain amount of, I'm going to stay where I am, even if the math suggests the other place is better. I don't know. So the devil you know and the fear of change are going to keep you where you are. But then there's the alternative, the opposing force is the grass is always greener. And so there's some people who are going to be like, ooh, but the grass is greener. And they're going to go anywhere, right? I lean towards that. If you give me the grass is greener, I'm like, ooh, the grass could be greener, right? And the fear of change is very low. But most people, it's the opposite. The grass might be greener, but ooh, change. And so the different people have different balances. But you have those two forces, and then you just have this economic, at some point, I can. So for a lot of people that I talk to, it's I will earn less money working remotely from Nicaragua, or I will have to retire early and stop working or whatever. But when I get there, okay, so I have this tax advantage, I have this lower cost of food, I have this lower cost of rent, and you put it all together. And at what point does your purchase power parity with the remaining money? And people are very bad at this math, obviously, or they'd be flooding down. Right? But it's you do this, and you're like, okay, so I can go out to eat and eat better food and live in a bigger house and have my air conditioning on all the time, and live better by moving. At what point? And then logically, unless you have something holding you back, family, whatever, then that you would go. And so what I feel like we're seeing in Canada is that. We're at the leading edge of a tipping point for a noticeable group of, which is still 0.01%, but a group who becomes very vocal. And even at 0.01%, unless you are a boom population, governments see that as this is a bad omen for the economy, because you need those workers, and the people who are leading edge to go are often good people, right? Not the poverty stricken, not the people who are unemployable. They don't have the ability to move in many cases, but it's the people who are able to do that math and are able to carry their knowledge worker jobs with them or have a good retirement. So it's a scary thing for an economy to see.
It's not like in the gross numbers or the relative numbers, they're not large, so it's not like any country is going to collapse or anything. But it is interesting because it is generally people who are driving jobs, driving ideas, driving economy, and that has got to be concerning. So I mean, I watched your video this morning, and one thought I had was 20 years ago who my buyers were as opposed to what they are now, and it's an interesting reflection. So 20 years ago, 2004, 2005, 2006, my buyers were speculators. They were Canadian, followed by Americans right behind them, and they were speculating. And there was two groups. One group that was wanting, like, I'm going to buy it now for a certain amount of money, and I'm going to sell it again for double in 5 or 6 years, and I'm going to make a great ROI. There was that group, and it didn't work out for them. And then there was the second group where like, they were placing bets. They were calculating on their retirement location, and they were placing some money in Mexico, placing some money in Costa Rica, maybe in Serbia, maybe in Nicaragua, maybe Panama. They were reasonably wealthy guys, and they were placing bets, sometimes 3 or 4, and they go, okay, and I'll make a decision in 15, 20 years which one I'm going to go to, depending on how things develop, right?
I got to jump in with, did you say Serbia in the midst? As someone who lived very close to the Serbian border for a while and has been all over Serbia, what?
Well, no, I meant to say Croatia.
Okay. I'm like, it has no coast, it has no mountains.
I've never been to Croatia, but I remember the images and the beach, and it was all very beautiful. And
Yeah.
Buying in Croatia, and I was like, wow, I don't know anything about Croatia.
Oh, Croatia. Okay, so I mean, I don't want for the listeners. Serbia is a fantastic country, full of nice people, and it's very low cost of living, and it's got Bratislava. It has oh no, I can't remember the capital. Beautiful capital, but the thing is that it's landlocked and it's flat. It's the Kansas of southeastern Europe, but it's right next to Croatia, and Croatia is like the other Italy.
Well, they said
so
it's the pictures are beautiful. Croatia looked gorgeous, and the other one was Ecuador. Ecuador was another one that people were
Ecuador was really popular. Yeah,
it was an interesting time because none of these people were really serious at all about living in Nicaragua. They were just placing their bets. Either it's a flip or it's we'll see what happens in 20 years, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Buyers today completely different. It's absolutely different. The buyers today are maybe 2 or 3 years into their research. They're educated on all sorts of different marketplaces. They know way more than I do about Ecuador, Mexico, Tulum, Cancun, all these different locations. They know way more than I do. They have done their research, and they're not looking for a flip. They're looking to either stay for 2, 3 months or to move,
Hmm.
and and it's a completely different buyer. And it's wonderful for me because I'm trying to build a community and I'm trying to build an industry and I'm trying to build an economic base for this for my area to become prosperous. So I'm loving what's going on right now because people are like coming with like they really want to get engaged in the community and they want to even if they're going to come for 2 or 3 months and they're still holding down some corporate job somewhere and they just get away on vacation and but slowly come
Sure.
more, they're like, hey, well, why don't we start a cooking school? Or why don't we start a mechanics school? Or why don't we start whatever your profession is? You're in digital media. Okay, let's start a class and you come down. Or you're a dentist. Let's build a little facility and you can come and teach them or give medical. And they're all really loving it. So it's a completely different group, right? So um, and they also are very well educated on the fact that like Sayulita, like when I was there 2003, 2002, and literally we walked the beach. Like I watched for miles from Sayulita. Well, from Bucharest, we just walked for like 5 miles, asking anybody anything for sale anywhere, right? And we did this for 2 days, and we found one guy. He said, "Yeah, I'll sell you a lot. It's $1 million." It's 4 miles from power. There's no road access. It's not on a beach, it's on a cliff. You fall off, you're gonna die. I was like, are you kidding me? He goes, no, it's $1 million. And that was 2002. So I bought two at that time, and he's got two in Sayulita. Those are $5 million each now. That's what you're talking about now. And he's like, there's no
Hmm.
way I can afford these numbers, right? So by far the bulk of the population is completely priced out of the marketplace, and that's where we're at now today. And so, if your budget is 50 to say $300,000 or something like that, some kind of reasonable number, you really only got a couple of choices left. You got Nicaragua, which I would argue is number one. Maybe you look at El Salvador if you believe that they can keep 70,000 hardened criminals in jail long enough for the country to recover. Maybe you got Belize to take a look at. You
Oh,
don't have
Belize is. Oh no, the cost of Belize, you couldn't possibly get a house for 300,000.
okay, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just there, and it was like they're talking about building lots in the countryside for 200,000 for empty lots. Like it is insane. Yeah,
Yeah, and then we
and
got
that's not
Ecuador.
on the island, like mainland.
Yeah, and then we got Ecuador. Ecuador, my assistant's from Ecuador, so I'm like he's here with me now, and he gives me the rundown on Ecuador all the time, and beautiful place and stuff. They got some cartel issues for sure, right? They got some a lot of So you got to make a calculated bet now on how the next 5 or 10 are going to play out in terms of security and lawlessness or lack of lawlessness and how. But you don't have to in Nicaragua.
Right.
You don't have to. You
Yeah,
don't have.
I want to add. I think obviously there's a you were talking about like the type of buyers you're getting, and like you used to have the flippers. One of the things that yes, the type of mostly North Americans, I assume, who are investigating the area, they've changed. But it's also probably true that Nicaragua's flipping market existed at one point, and now it's gone. It's completely gone now. So I'm sure that there's a Nicaraguan side that kind of took the people who are like, "Ooh, I could do that and do a flip," and now they're like, "Oh, no, I couldn't," which is a little bit unfortunate for Nicaragua that has gone away for the time being. But that certainly would be discouraging people from that.
Yeah, well, the other thing that people I don't know if they understand, but I'll throw it out there so they can agree with me or not, which is that the amount of land, if you look at the well, this is a map of Nicaragua here. If you look at it, it's the biggest country in Central America. It's got the most land. It's got lots of land, but the amount of land that is in a state that a North American or European, in terms of title security and title development, and a lack of breaks and chains of the title changes from the beginning of this becoming a country, is very limited. So, like I was saying, the land that is clean and ready to build a decent home on is very limited. Although it looks like there's a lot, when you get into it, you're like, well, actually, when you start to understand how difficult some of the titles are in the registry and how difficult it is to clean them, almost nobody would do what we did. We just kind of just blast ahead with endless amount of money, never stop for 20 years to get it to the point where it's like, oh, okay, now it's finally like I'm $4 million poorer, but it's the same as your house in Seattle. The property, like the cornerstone, like the brick, the foundation of. So why in the world did you ever go down and say, I'm going to build a $400,000 house on land that you are not sure if you actually own, or somebody might have a claim on it, or blah, blah, blah. Like, you won't, right? And so I've had this conversation with a number of guys, one guy in particular from Austria, from Vienna, nice guy. And we had this conversation like 17 years ago. I was like, dude, like, Fritz, don't buy that lot. Just give me 5 more years. Let me get a few more steps along with Tesoro and buy after me, but just don't do anything. Well, he did it. And we were going back like 13 years ago, right? And he bought it. And then he calls me 2 years later and says, man, you were right. Some guy came along across the street, says he owns half my lot. And you know what? He may be right. Why would I build a $300,000 or $400,000 house there? What I really want to do and have a really nice place on the beach when I'm not even sure if I own the land. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's the foundation of it, right? You can't get any advancement unless you have that settled. So the amount of land in this country that is in that state is very limited. It's a very tough road to get it to that point. So that's why I say, like, in the game of musical chairs that is being played here, how many seats are left for a Canadian American to retire at? It's deceptive because there are fewer than you think.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, I talk on my channel a bit about the reals and the leases, because they provide protection against that. The traditional deeds, obviously, they can work, but they take more work, and there's certain risks associated with them. And so many people are like, well, I would never buy on the beach with a lease. I'm like, are you kidding? I look for leases. Like, I like them, the indigenous leases, because you have that protection of the indigenous community.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's another discussion, because people get very, very confused when you start talking about, hey, there's like at least 7 different types of title, whereas we're just used to one. There's just, you buy it and that's that. And no, but no, there's other. Well, maybe we got 3 maybe here. Maybe we got freehold, leasehold, and cooperative titles. We have cooperative titles up here, right? And so they have a number more, but also each one of those titles can be interrupted by like. By land claims, land seizures, by possessions, by court judgments. You can just get a court judgment on somebody and get this other type of title they have, which we don't have anything like that. They show up too, and people start trying to sell them. It's very, very confusing. But in order to sort all that stuff out, to get it to the same state as your house in Colorado or whatnot, is you have to negotiate and usually pay all kinds of different dudes for all sorts of crazy claims to extinguish those claims, to get it to a place where it's the same as a fee simple in America, which is what we've done at Tesoro. That's why we've spent 20 years doing this. But most people aren't going to do this because it's so risky. So
right, and the biggest risk, of course, is the time that goes into it. Like, anyone could, in theory, do it, but you could spend 20 years like you have, and if you're doing it with enough properties, of course, some of them are going to clear and something isn't.
Okay, so I watched your video last night as I was going to bed. And one thing struck me very, very hard, and I'd like to say it because it's not said nearly enough, and that is that it's because we're Canada and America very close, we understand each other, but we also see little differences. And one of the major differences I see, and particularly with my buddies that have gone to work in the States, and they come back and say, you know what, one of the biggest differences about America, and one of the most beautiful things about this country, and you're showing it all the time, and I just like to point it out because it's a beautiful thing, and that is that Americans genuinely like seriously, from deep down, want their compatriots to do well. They genuinely will give you good advice, well thought out advice, and they seriously want to see their neighbor do well. And they will help them and assist them and give them timely advice and give them timely contacts and listen to their problem and give them a good connection to somebody who can solve it now. And they don't want anything back. They just doing it from the goodness of their heart, and they like to see you succeed. And you're doing this all the time, and it's fantastic. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things about America, because we are not the same. And that's why I think when you say, like, I believe if the world economy is $100 trillion, America is a quarter of that. I don't think that's ever going to change. I think America will always be in a leadership position because of that attribute. Canadians are a little bit different. Like, we will walk the walk with you. We will go a certain distance on that. Like, we'll talk and chat and give you good advice. But when it comes time to, like, hey, no, like, okay, these are my marbles. Like, okay, now I've taught you enough. We've talked enough. Now you go away now. I'm gonna hang on to my marbles. Whereas Americans are like, no, you can have some of my marbles, and we'll share marbles. We'll make some more marbles. Canadians are not quite won't quite go there, right? And it's for better or for worse. It's just something I've noticed. But a lot of my buddies from business school who work in the States, we talk about this, right? And they're like, yeah, it's wonderful, man. Like, I don't. I'm taking on the American way. I'm just going to give you good advice, good contacts, good friends, expert guys, and I'm just going to give you these, and you run with it, and you be successful, and then let's all be happy, and we'll have beer and dinner. And I don't want a nickel or anything for that. And it's a wonderful thing. I just really, I notice it and I appreciate it.
That's a unique perspective. I've never actually heard someone say that about America before, but I mean, I guess I can kind of see that. I don't know. Coming from the U.S., it's uh, we see ourselves as normal, whatever we do, right? So I don't know, but it is going through life as a in business in the United States. We're definitely taught or encouraged a lot the concept of like rising tide, right? And like managers, they drive home like good managers excel by making their teams excel.
Yeah, good to be back. So, the other thing when I was watching your video last night, the other thing that popped in my head is the fact that you did it. So you even did the video. So you talked for 45 minutes about that, which kind of struck me and took me aback, because generally Canadians are a little bit different in the sense that they try to understand other people, but they don't put any effort into being understood. So they don't go out and say, well, this is what I am, and this is who I am, and this is what I think. They don't do that. They spend more time trying to understand who you are. So
Mm-hmm.
so the fact that you put that out there, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I would never do a video like that, and I don't know anybody that would in my world. But since Scott has put that out there, since he started it, and he's getting this big reaction, it's a really interesting topic. Yes, for sure, I'm going to jump in and start talking and tell them what I think. And you're going to see a lot of Canadians, now you brought it up, you're going to see the comments explode, and they're going to jump in the conversation. But but it's kind of a funny thing. So that leads me to your other point where my back went up when you said people like Nicaragua because there's less Americans there. And I would say that is absolutely false. Maybe a little bit. I mean, there's always change, right? But it's because the Canadians don't really want to hang out with Canadians either. Like, I don't think many Canadians go, oh, I want to go there so I can hang out with another Canadian. We can talk about how the Canucks did against the Leafs. Like, they don't. We'll do that in Canada. They actually want to go out to a community and help build a church or a school or fix their water. That's what they actually want to do, but they won't. So that one got me a little bit. Yes, there's some truth. It's nice that everybody isn't talking about, well, I think this and I think that, and they do everything weird here. It's not like we do it. They should do it my way. We don't want to listen to that. But that comes from all sides, right? And so I don't think, like, even I'm having a little reaction because I don't want to fill up Playa Tesoro with Canadians. I don't want it to be a Canadian enclave. I want to make sure there's room for the Brazilian and Ecuadorian and the French and the German and whoever, and
Mm-hmm.
Nicaragua, Guatemalans, because it's a more vibrant community, and I think that's what most Canadians are attracted to in Nicaragua, which is, I think that's part of this switch you're seeing right now in the last 6 months, let's say, or like uh, you know, parts of Mexico are becoming very, very similar to Vancouver, and
Right.
that really appeals to me more. Like my son told me, he went to Cancun and the Gold Coast. He's like, "What a dump! This is like Miami, and there's like discos and lights and everything. I'm out of here. This is a dump." Right? Whereas other people, "Oh yeah, Cancun's great, or the Gold Coast is wonderful, man. You can just like Miami." It's like, well,
Right. Like, well, I just left Miami for a reason.
yeah.
I was just in Cancun and I'd never been before. And I honestly have to say, I think Cancun is the worst city I've ever set foot in on earth. I know of nothing to compare it to. St. Louis, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, my son, he's 24, and he's in the age where he wants to party and likes to have a beer and stuff like that, and he likes pretty girls. Who doesn't? But he's like, I really dislike what's happened in this whole Cancun strip. Like, I'm out of here. I was going to stay 2 days longer. This is nothing. So we're all talking generalities, and everything's general, and everybody has reactions and stuff, and there's always fringes and everything. But for a general statement, what's happening with the Canadians, I think, is that they're just finding that uh, you got to earn way over 100,000 a year just to pay your rent, put some food on the table, and most people aren't earning that, and have a car, let's say, and it's just it's becoming unsustainable, and the solution to that is, well, it's at least 20 to 30 years to find a real solution to this, because it's taken us that long to create the problem, and we're working on it, but it's going to take time, and people are getting frustrated. They're really tired. They're exhausted, really, and they might be 30, they might be 40, might be 50, might be 60, and if they have $1 million, that's not even close to enough. You need way more than that to like at least 10 times that to be able to take 6 months off and maintain
Right.
things. It's not small numbers. It's really hard to earn that money in Canada. It's a very competitive place. So, but on the flip side, the other flip side is that I think, if I got this right, there is no country in the world that if you have money and it's invested in Canada, number one on the planet, that your next generation is going to inherit that wealth. So the probability of you losing wealth once you've got it in the country is as low as it can get on the planet. So if you have wealth, you keep wealth. And if you come with wealth from Indonesia or China or Japan or France and you place it in Canada, you can be almost certain there's no better bet that it'll still be there for your children. So that's the flip side of it. Because somebody is collecting all the interest payments. Somebody is collecting all the rent. Somebody is collecting, and those guys, of course, are very happy, and it's a great investment. So it's a very tricky situation. So I can totally, the general population is tired.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So on the flip side, so Canada, obviously, you know, we know that there's a tipping point. We know that things are happening in Canada that are driving Canadians specifically to start looking abroad. But this is actually a general trend. Like, yes, Canadians are seeing it as Canada because to them it is. But Americans are also seeing it as America. And Germans are seeing it as Germany, and Brits are seeing it as England. And there's a lot of countries that are starting to experience this drive out. And I was just speaking to someone who's, and she's in this interview right today. She's part Canadian and part French. She has citizenship in both countries, and she was looking at locations in Africa and locations in Latin America. So she had a lot of potential places she could go and still be close to home, language she's familiar with, things like that. So she's actually in a better boat than most Canadians because she speaks Spanish fluently. She's lived in Spain for a long time, even though she's not Spanish, and uh, with that, there's a lot of Europeans are looking other places. They're not even Nicaragua's not on their map, but this migration from kind of the global north to the global south, as people are just realizing that the cost of living is very high, and each of them thinks it's unique to them, and then really from our perspective, it's like it's one big solid brush. Real estate is going up across the north. Inflation is going up across the north, and no one's doing a particularly bad job. No, like obviously some places are better and some places are worse, but it's very big trends. Um, but then so what we kind of perceive it as, I think, from the Nicaraguan perspective, we being a very loose term here, is that there is a draw here, right? Canadians are kind of seeing it as a push, right? Oh, something's wrong. I need to go somewhere. But Nicaragua and a lot of countries nearby, especially El Salvador, but Guatemala as well, Panama, we've got some really great target locations here. And then, like you mentioned, like Ecuador, yeah, they've had a little issues. They're not the place they used to be. But Bolivia, Argentina, Paraguay, right? Colombia, they're all drawing people in pretty heavily, cost effective, relatively safe. So from a Latin American perspective, I think that there's a very big, like, Latin America is becoming more attractive. And from a Nicaraguan perspective, it really feels like Nicaragua is really becoming attractive. And we're seeing the fear response from the North American governments of, post on the channel and immediately government propaganda is being repeated really quickly. Oh, but you have this problem. Oh, but you have that problem, which aren't things that would make sense to someone outside of North America, because they'll say things that like a European would think were positive. So clearly it's not meant to enact a reaction from Europe, and things that are demonstrably untrue and would be nonsensical to someone who's actually been to Nicaragua at least. And so when they say these things, it's like, well, there's clearly a response going on of fear and something panic.
Yeah.
And why is it being posted? Because posting to those of us who are here doesn't make any sense. Like, obviously we know you just made that up. Like, I can look out the window and tell that isn't true. And it doesn't make any sense to Europeans, because they'd be like, but you just said something positive to us. Why is the tone negative? So it's a very isolated, going out of their way, putting in effort to try to make the region look bad, specifically to Americans and Canadians who have a different outlook on the world. And to some degree, it's just they have different words. They have reaction words that other places don't have, because they share a language, of course. And so those words tend to get bantered about, trying to get people to panic when looking here. And to me, that really speaks volumes, that it's whether it's investors, economists, government officials, whoever, media, putting out this panic message of, we got to, that was great English, we need to convince people not to look more seriously. We need to make sure people don't get on that initial flight and go find out, because I mean, maybe you could be here for 12 hours and have no idea, right? You get off the plane to Managua and you're wandering around Managua. Okay, you could believe some things if you're not here long enough. But once you spend any amount of time, you hit Granada, you hit León, you hit the beach, you like just drive around the country, get some food. After 24, 48 hours, you're like, what have they been talking about? This is not even do you think they're getting the wrong country? Like it really feels like that degree of and I said this on a video recently, that the issue is not skewed news, it's utter fabrication in many cases. It's like,
yeah. My best example of that was I'd say about 4 years ago. I was just a day like today, phone rings. It's my lawyer from Nicaragua, and it's like, he's like, I'm sitting in a restaurant very close to the Honduran border in the middle of nowhere with like 7 guys. We're watching CNN. And in this very same town where we are, apparently the police are here. They're slaughtering everybody with machine guns. There's blood flowing down the street. There's bodies decapitated everywhere. And we're watching this on TV. And we're sitting in this same spot. Geoff, could you explain to me what the hell is going on? Because we just can't even understand this misinformation. And that's like, it's propaganda put out to make people afraid to come to this country, because there's ghosts in the closet, and they dislike each other intensely, and they have good reason for that. Part of the drug trade, cocaine and Reagan goes way way back. Allowing transshipment into Florida, carry the cocaine from Colombia, going back into the 70s and 80s, and using the money to buy arms to keep fighting. I mean, it's a deep, deep, deep distrust. But that is utter fabrication, and it's exhausting taking, like, I've been dealing with this for 20 years, one by one, telling people, well, it's simply not true what you just said. Like, you just come here, it's just absolutely not true. And so yeah, the energy you put into your podcast and pushing out your message to not be scared, don't be afraid, just come have a look. It's all cool. The basic, I think the basic point is that if you fundamentally believe Lord of the Ring, no, Lord of the Flies,
Very different.
that if you put a bunch of young people on an island that are going to kill each other, if you believe that to be true, there's absolutely no empirical evidence that that would actually occur. There's actually a really good book my wife is reading. The opposite will occur, and there is evidence for that in Australia, in the South Pacific. A bunch of boys got stranded on an island for 3 years, and they found them like 4 years later, and they were in great physical condition. They're having a great time. Everybody taking care of each other. They work together to survive, catch fish, and what. So the fundamental premise that humans want to hurt each other is false. The fundamental premise that humans actually are kind to each other, they help each other, you put them together and they assist each other, is that's the truth. That's human nature at its base level. And you can't pick that up on CNN or Fox. I mean, it's just like everybody wants to kill each other and they're all arguing and fighting and calling each other names and lying and everything. That's not real. Real people are all over this planet, so don't be afraid to come to Nicaragua or El Salvador, because fundamentally, everybody is their base instinct is to be kind and gentle and have a conversation and talk. That's human instinct. So don't believe the trash.
Right.
Just
I do think from now on, though, I am going to use the example that it's a lot like an inverse Lord of the Rings, because Nicaragua is a lot like the Shire. And everyone's just interested in growing food and throwing parties and getting drunk with and smoking in the evening and just chilling after dinner. And we're worried about the forces of Mordor coming from the north. And that is, but they're not really knowledgeable. They know that somewhere off there is some black gate that's going to open and the forces may come. But we're really focused on making the best beef Wellington and having a really big beer. And when someone gives us a pint of beer, we get very excited.
No, that's absolutely true. And it's funny you say that, because in my experience in León, that was exactly what hit me. And the very first time I walked into that town, it hit me like a ton of bricks. As like, these people are very innocent to the nasty side of our culture. They have no understanding of how nasty we are to each other. They're just kind, and they're very fearful of what I'm talking about myself, my very first meeting, what I represent bringing as a white guy with blonde hair they've never seen before. What am I going to bring and destroy? And are they going to allow me into this is only 20 years ago, into their culture or not? That was my first interview when I got to León. And they continue to have that fear, is like, what are the conquistadors from the north, the imperialistas, what are they bringing into our world that is going to cause a lot of pain and hardship that we don't really understand? But I don't know what they've been taught in school, like, but it's not that the north is a good place. It's certainly not. That's what they've not been taught. I don't know what they've been taught, but it ain't pretty.
I have seen the wall of the Ruben Dario School in Guadalupe, and there's a lot of warnings.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's a misunderstanding for sure, and this process of them understanding as same as us is like, well, generally people are very kind and they're very helpful and want just want to have a shire where we all hang out and have festivals. That's what generally everybody wants. But yes, some
Right.
places
Like
want
the
other.
Shire, but with parades. That needs to be a thing. I need to make a poster of that.
So yeah, there's truth on both sides of the coin. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I got to go back to my point. Is that like just in ballpark numbers? I was thinking about this morning. If there's 25 million buyers that are in North America, I'd say minimum, that are looking for what they're looking for Nicaragua really. I would say there's at least 25 million. There's really only, like I was just thinking about this morning, maybe there's 5,000 chairs,
Right.
maybe 10,000, maybe, but I don't think anything like that in terms of you want the same title security and the same cornerstone of like good strong title. Like I don't even know. I don't even know if there's 7,000 chairs left.
If,
So
if you're looking at it from the perspective, and this is important for the listeners, right? There's a because you work in property development, so you have a view very strongly in this direction. If you're looking at coming to Nicaragua or somewhere, and your plans or goal is to be able to own and build, and have those, whether it's pre-existing or empty lots that you're going to build on, you have some concerns and limitations. If you're looking at coming down and just renting, you're looking at coming down and staying in hotels or staying in resorts or staying in apartments, the numbers are huge. There's so many available places, far in excess of 5 to 10,000 for sure,
yeah, yeah.
that you'd be very safe. So there's different groups will be affected by that in different ways for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, certainly. So, like, um, I was talking to my friend this morning. She's from France, and she's from a very, very wealthy family in France. And she's like, "Come stay in my castle." I was like, "Okay, we'll stay in your castle, and we're going to do that in August." And it's a massive castle. Like, oh my god!
Yep.
Um, but so we were coming off this point of like the speculative side of like the 20 years ago we had the speculators. So Jeff, you're saying that there's no speculative value in buying in Nicaragua at this moment? And she was asking this question to me, right? And I was like, well, I think if you're going down there to speculate, you're a fool. Like there never was a speculative, and I don't think there ever will be. But for me in real estate, what you want to do is do your analysis, pick your market, pick where you think where you think it's going to be good, and you think within like 5, 10, or 15, 20 years it's going to be a lot better, so the price is going to rise, and then you lay your bet, you buy your piece, and then you hope for the best. You hope your analysis was good, and if it doesn't work out, well, whatever, that's life.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know that I don't really think. Um, if you compare with like Mexico, say Puerto Escondido, like where my ex-wife has built a huge house, that place has gone up 3 times. I'd say twice or maybe 3 times in the last 5 years, and like so she's made a killing, right? And good deal, smart woman, well done, but that's really good analysis. But I do think at this point, if your budget is 100,000 or something like that, I don't think you have many options left.
Right. No, absolutely not. Argentina, Paraguay, Nicaragua, really the CA4, right? Guatemala, you can still get into. Honduras, you can still get into. This region is still okay. Panama, you're struggling for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, in Canada, Canada and America, I think you got to also make a division between the haves and the have-nots. There's a very sharp distinction between I have real estate, meaning I have my home and maybe an investment property, maybe another one or another one or another one, and the group that don't own their home, and there's a very sharp division there. So they see the world very, very differently, and their opportunities and their prospects are very, very different. So, this economy that is resource based, and then it's basically construction and housing, whereas the American economy is so much more diversified with entertainment industry, the IT industry. I mean, it's so much more diversified than ours. So when you're seeing a slowdown in the real estate sector like we are now because of high interest rates, last 2 years. People are getting really, really scared because um, it's not super well diversified. So if you're in a have-not group, you're starting to panic. And even the people who have that in the have area, they're like, well, they have different motivations, but there's a very sharp distinction between people being able having
Mhm.
a real estate portfolio or something, and the people that don't. It's a very, very sharp.
Mhm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think the United States definitely has a lot of opportunity for being outside of real estate and still being very uh, in the haves group, right? It's not necessarily that real estate defines you or sets you apart. You're able to be in a lot of different areas, and in a lot of cases, business ownership is the larger driver than property ownership.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, for sure. So it's a different if it's a different it's a different dynamic in the American economy, but still, plenty of people in America. We had a chat last night with a fellow from Montana who is pretty much in for buying half of the Orange House listed for sale. So he's pretty sounds like he's pretty much in, and really nice guy. And he said he sells insurance, personal life insurance. That's what he said. And he's just like, I'm 2 more years, I'm done. I don't think he was 50. And my wife's got 9 more years, and I'm in. I've done my analysis. I've been analyzing for 3 years. I've looked at all kinds of different marketplaces, Ecuador, I'll list a whole list of them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this one meets my criteria. One of my criteria is the time zone. It's the same time zone as Montana, so I can be down there. And if someone says, you got to get a Zoom call at 2 o'clock, it's the same 2 o'clock, and they don't know if I'm in
Yep.
Montana or Nicaragua. So that's important to me because I can pretend I'm in Montana when I'm not, and nobody knows. And it's like, absolutely, you can. Lots of people do. You can
Yep.
pretend you're, but you're not, right? Easy to do. Lots of people do that. I do that.
Right. It looks like you're in Nicaragua right now.
But usually it's the other way. Usually
Right.
I just went swimming and I come in. Oh boy, it's really cold out there, isn't it? Oh,
Yeah, I need to get some maps for the office. I've been meaning to do that. I gotta track down something good. All right. Well, Geoff, it's been good. I've got kids and dogs and Storm that I have to go deal with here. But thanks so much for being on. We got to do this on a semi-regular basis or something. This would be maybe not always about cancer.